Hey everyone, so welcome to the first part of beginner friendly tutorial series for Blender. So in today's video, we are going to talk about how to navigate inside Blender, and we are also likely going to talk about what are all these panels that you see around you. We will learn them in deep as this series goes on. So in today's video, we are just going to talk a little bit about Blender and what stuff is where. If you have any doubts, you can ask them in the comment section below, or you can join my Discord server. Yeah, and please make sure to support this channel by subscribing. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing you can see over here, the cube at the center of the screen, and when I press my left mouse button, I can select it. Quickly, I will just turn on my screencast keys add-on. Now, as you can see on the bottom left corner, you can see which keys I'm pressing right now. So I'm pressing the N key right now, and it is opening this properties panel. So this is my properties panel. Most of the times when you install add-ons, they probably might show over here. Some add-ons can show on the top like this. As you can see, Retouple Flow add-on, this is showing over here. This is a Blender Toolkit add-on, it is showing over here. Now I have talked about what add-ons I have enabled in my Blender version in my previous video, the prerequisite video. So if you haven't watched that video, do check that out, and that will answer your question about why my Blender looks a little bit different than yours, and also the way you are going to follow this video tutorials. I have made a video on how to learn Blender in 2025, so do check that video out as well if you want, or else you can just watch this video entirely. So now I can select my cube with a left mouse button. I can just hover over it and click on it. But what else can I do? So I can look around this cube. So if you hold down your middle mouse button like this, I can rotate around that cube if I move my mouse up and down. So if you have your Blender opened or you're just watching it, just keep in mind that middle mouse button is to look around. Can I go closer to this object? I totally can. Just select the object and hold down your control button, middle mouse button, hold that as well. And then if you drag your mouse up, you can see that I'm getting closer to the object. And if you drag your mouse down, you can see I'm getting far away from the object. So now I can look around the object. I can zoom in and zoom out. In Blender, there are two types of zooming in and zooming out. First is holding down control middle mouse button and dragging your mouse like this. So this is called zooming in. So you cannot zoom infinitely inside anything. So if I get like a little bit more closer, as you can see, my zooming stops over here and I can't zoom in anymore. So what you have to do in that case is hold down your control middle mouse button, get a little bit far away. Now I can zoom in properly. So this time we are going to dolly inside the object. So dollying closer to the object in this way, get closer to the object without that limitation. Now for that, you have to hold down control and shift and then hold down middle mouse button, and then you can drag your mouse up, and now I can dolly in. Now I have gotten very close to this corner. So I can now zoom in and zoom out for precision, zooming in and zooming out. So dollying doesn't have any constraint, but zoom does have a little bit of constraint to it. So as you can see, it's getting a little bit hard to zoom right now. So I'm gonna dolly in into this corner like this. And now I can precisely zoom in and zoom out. Basically, I use zooming for getting closer to an object with some precision. And I use dolly to like quickly get closer to any object, okay? Now, there is one more thing. You can move around your viewport. Now, what is a viewport? So this screen that you see right now, so you're going to spend 90% of your time over here. So this viewport itself is like a camera in a 3D environment. So we are right now rotating and moving that camera around that object. So this is called a viewport camera. So remember that. Now there is one more operation that you can perform, which is panning. Now to pan, you have to hold down shift key and then middle mouse button. And then as you can see, I can pan around that object. So I'm just gonna get a little bit far away so that we can pan easily. Now, as you can see, I can pan, and I can pan it in any view direction. So if I go like this, then I can pan it like that. So I can basically move my viewport camera at a certain location with respect to whatever object that I have selected. If you haven't selected any object, Blender will automatically take reference of the last object that was selected, and it will probably move in that way. So now I can rotate around the object, I can zoom in and zoom out, dolly in and dolly out, and I can pan around the object. Okay, so these are the three major navigation practices that you are going to do to move around any object or move around in the scene. Now let's talk about flying and walking. So if you have a massive scene in Blender, you can hold down Shift and tilde key. Now this key is, I guess, on the left side of your number key. So once you do that, your mouse is going to be free form for rotation. So I am moving my mouse right now, and you can see a crosshair at the center. So we are in the flying mode right now, and I can press W to like walk front or like fly in the front. If I press Q, I go down. If I press E, I go up. S to go back, and it is camera dependent. So if I'm looking down, I'm going to go behind that direction. Now if I hold down Shift and then press W, you'll see that my speed has increased. So it is almost like sprinting in a game. And if I hold down Control, then my speed becomes much slower. Also, you can, at the bottom, you can see Blender has given you all the tips. So my bad, I said Control, but in the tips section, we can totally see that you have to press down Alt to go slower. As you can see, we are going slower. If I remove the Alt key, we are going at the normal speed. If I hold down Shift, we are going at the fast speed. Okay, toggling gravity, I think it is for tab. So if I press tab, as you can see, we are falling down, and it will fall down until we are colliding with any object. So let me just position myself above this cube, and let's see if we interact with that cube. So yeah, I have fallen down on this cube, and now I can walk around on that cube. Okay, so you have to press tab again so that we get out of the gravity mode. So all the things that you can do are at the bottom, and you can stop previewing this. Like you can stop this fly mode by just pressing right mouse button, and you'll go back to your default position. In Blender, you can cancel anything just by right clicking. So most of the time you'll see, like, suppose you accidentally grabbed this. Instead of confirming it by pressing your left mouse button, you can just press right mouse button again, and it will cancel that operation totally. So it will just go back the way it was. So, but if you go ahead and grab this and you press left mouse button and you confirm the position, you can still go ahead and press Ctrl Z. That will undo everything. But if you wanted that change back, I think you can press Ctrl Shift and Z. So it will redo everything. So everything is on your left hand. So all the controls are on your left hand mostly. So modeling becomes easy like this. So yeah, by the way, I went into the edit mode. If you want to manipulate any mesh, you can go directly into the edit mode pressing tab like this, or you can go on the top and click on edit mode. And now I can make changes to mesh. The way I was making changes to mesh was pressing G, so I grabbed it by pressing G. But I think it is too much for the first video, so we are not going to go deep into that. Now that you know how to navigate inside Blender with some basic navigation, let's just briefly talk about what these windows are and what are these different tabs. So the first thing that we talked about, this is your viewport, and in this viewport you are going to basically work around. You're going to add stuff over here, you are going to manipulate stuff over here, and we are, as you can see, we are in a layout mode. So if you go into the modeling mode, as you can see, we don't have to go into the edit mode by pressing tab. You can just get over here in the modeling mode, and you can change your mesh. You can go back into the layout mode, but I personally feel pressing tab and going into the edit mode much more convenient. If you are going to sculpt anything, you can directly go into the sculpt mode and you can start sculpting with all these brushes over here. UV editing, if you want to do UV editing, this is our 3D mesh, and this is the UV unwrapped model. We will talk about this later in future. This is for texture painting. So if you want to texture your object, you can do that over here. Like, these are all the shortcuts, by the way, which you can use. Now going into shader editor, we are on Eevee. Okay, this can be a little bit heavy if your computer is not that good, so it might lag just a little bit. So here you can add materials and things. This is the animation tab. If you want to animate anything, you go over here. So in general, all of these tabs that you see, they are just convenient little shortcuts that you can use to go in different modes quickly, or else you can just go ahead on top left corner and you can switch to all those modes from over here without changing this layout window. So you can switch to all of these modes and we will talk about them in future as we go on. Okay. Now let's talk about this window over here. This is called as outliner. If you want to know what window is called, you just have to hover over this icon of everything and you'll know what it is called. So this is our properties panel. This is our outliner. So in outliner, everything that is in the scene, it is available in outliner. So over here, if I select the cube, you can see that that cube is also selected in the outliner. And if I do the opposite, if I click on the cube, it is selected in the viewport. So if you add anything, it will also show in outliner. But I don't think you can add any asset directly in the outliner. Now there are really cool properties inside outliner that we will talk about later. But just for your information, everything that in the 3D scene it is available over here as well. Now the properties panel. Now this panel helps you to change some settings, manipulate the mesh and add some behavioral changes. So this contains all the properties and whatever slider, whatever value that you need to change, you can change it over here in this panels. We have our scene properties. Now as you can see, if you hover over here, it says scene. So scene has its own render properties. So this is referring to all the render settings. Now this is related to all the output settings of the render. View layer, it is related to render as well. The scene, now it is talking about all the scene that you see right now. World settings, so this is our modifiers tab. You are going to use this a lot. Particle system, I don't think people, I guess you can still use particle system, but geometry node probably has replaced this in a way. But if you don't want to go math heavy, then you can just use the particle system anyways. Physics tab is my personal favorite and I use this a lot in my day-to-day life. I have created a lot of animations with physics itself and it is really fun. Constraint are also some conditions that you can put on your mesh. You can animate with this and you can also create some nice animations with it. Now this data and material, you'll probably not use data that much, but the material is something that you will use a lot. And texture also, if you are working inside Blender itself, like you are animator or renderer, then you are going to use this texture tab as well a lot. All the properties are over here. And this is our handy toolbar on our left. You can find all sorts of tools and if you hover over them, you can see that it says move. So it is used to move your mesh around with the help of gizmos. Now I really like to use gizmo itself. There are shortcuts to move inside, like move object inside Blender, like if you press G, then you can grab your object, and if you press any of the axis, suppose I press the x-axis, now it is constrained to the x-axis and it is moving over there. If you press Y, then it will move on the y-axis. If you press Z, it will move on the z-axis. Now doing that is okay, but you always have to keep in mind what axis your model is pointing at, and the great way is to just turn on the gizmo itself. Now this is a really handy way to know, like I know that blue axis is the z-axis because on the top you can see the z-axis is over there, red is the x and green is the y. So I can just move around things like this and I feel this is much more easier for me. Now for rotating, I do use shortcuts. So rotate on the x, rotate on the y, as you can see, r and y, and then rotate on the z like this. I don't use gizmo for rotation and scale. I just use the shortcut. But the thing is, it is easier to visualize what axis I'm rotating it on, just the help of this gizmo. So I want to rotate my model like this. So I want to rotate around my y axis. So for that, all you need to do is press R and then press Y. And now your model is going to rotate on the Y axis like this. Now if I press R and if I press Z, as you can see, my model is rotating on the Z axis. And now if I want to rotate it on the X, you guessed it right, I have to press R and X and it is rotating like this. So all of these things will get built in your muscle memory the more you try to do it. So for the beginners, if you are trying to follow along, you can write this stuff down somewhere, or you can hover over here and you can see all the shortcuts. So the shortcut is R, as you can see at the end. The shortcut for this is G, as you can see over there. For this it is S. So S to scale, R to rotate, and M to move. Transform tool, it is the combination of all these tools over there, and it has everything in it. So you can rotate, scale, and move all at once. So usually I never used this. As I said, I just used my transform tool. Now this thing, the select box thing, it has 3 selection modes and 1 tweak mode. So if I set it to tweak and if I just grab this, as you can see, I can just grab objects just by left mouse button clicking on them. I don't have to press G anymore. But yeah, there is one more thing. You'll have, like, if you want to grab anything in a specific axis, then you need to be facing that axis. So if I just click on the X, I'm now looking at it from the sideways. So if I now grab it like this, it will not move in the X direction. It will just move in the Z and Y plane. So if you are looking at certain axis, then it will only move in that direction like that. You might have seen me resetting the position and scale right now. So I'll just tell you guys. So I'm pressing Alt. If you hold down Alt and if you press G, so it will reset its location. Hold down Alt, and so I just have to add some random rotation. Okay. So now this cube is randomly rotated. If I hold down Alt and if I press R, it has resetted its rotation. And if I scale this weirdly, if I hold down Alt and if I press S, it has resetted its scale. Now this will only work, like I grabbed it somewhere else. Okay. Now this will only work if it's if you go into the object properties. As you can see, it has some location. So this location is of this origin point, the dot that you see over there. So if this is not 0, it is something else. And if you press Alt G, as you can see, it goes to 0. If I rotate this cube on the Z, say 45 degrees, you know that this is rotated 45 degrees, and Blender knows it too because we haven't applied this rotation. So if I just press Alt R, it is just going to get 0. But if I go ahead and apply the rotation, you can make any of this 0, like location and rotation, and you can make scale 1 if you apply it to them. Now it is important practice to do, and we'll talk about it in future. So for now, to apply the rotation or scale or anything, you have to press Ctrl and A. If you press Ctrl A, this pop-up window will appear and it says apply. So I want to apply the rotation. If I apply the rotation, you can see this now has become its 0 degrees, or you can say this is now its main rotation, you can say. In this 3D world, now if I press Alt R, you'll see that nothing is happening. Now if I rotate it by minus 45 degree, you'll see now the Z is set to minus 45, and if I press Alt R, it goes back to that position. Okay, so we are just going to go ahead and apply the rotation again so that it gets back to its default state. So this is how you do some basic stuff in Blender. Now this were the navigation part. Okay, so the tweak is done. Now this 3 selection modes. Now these 3 selection modes are unique in themselves. So the first is box select. So as you can see, this cube, we have that cube in our scene. If I click and drag anywhere on the cube, that cubes get selected. Now this is viewport dependent. So if there is any object behind it, it probably might not get selected. But the thing is that only box select works like this. For circle and lasso select, as you can see, I'm clicking and hovering over all of those on this cube over here, and nothing is happening. But as soon as my cursor goes on this origin point of that object, it gets selected. So for the circle and lasso, you'll need to making sure that you are selecting its origin point. So as you can see, it doesn't matter how much area I cover of that box, it is not getting selected. You need to make sure that you are selecting it via origin. Now this doesn't work same in edit mode. So if I go into the edit mode, and by default it is set to box select, I can just select all the words. And as I said, it is view dependent. It will not select anything that is behind it. And the same thing goes for the circle select. So with circle select, anything, like I'm holding my left mouse button by the way, and I'm selecting everything. And with middle mouse button, anywhere else in the scene or on the cube, you can rotate around and you can select. But as you can see that my selection is gone. So to prevent that from happening, what you can do is you can select stuff from this side, and then you can rotate around, hold down shift, and then select these things as well. So this way you can select multiple multiple objects, or you can select multiple lines or vertices, whatever you want. Same thing with the lasso. Let's go in this view. Let's select everything. And as you can see, it didn't select this one. So I'm just going to hold down shift and select this one. So in this way, you can select multiple vertices with the lasso select. So you can toggle between them, by the way, by pressing W. So when you press W, you can see that these tools are toggleable. So I just like it to be on box select by default. So I have not seen a lot of YouTubers talk about 3D cursor, because 3D cursor is also a very useful thing in Blender. So suppose I'm just going to go ahead and make a shape. So I'm beveling this shape right now by Control B. And as you can see, this face now has some direction to it. Now I don't know what that direction is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and hold down shift and then do right mouse button. And as you can see that my cursor is on that face. So now I can do shift A and then I can add things to it. But one more feature of the 3D cursor is that it can align itself to the planes. So as I said, I don't know what rotation this has. So I'm just going to click on the cursor, and orientation right now it is set to view. So if I click right now, as you can see, this cursor, it is now facing towards me. If I click on over there, it was facing towards me, by the way. Now this arrow was pointing towards me. Now if I click it over here, it is different. So 3D cursor, it also has its own location and rotation, and it is very useful because we spawn things on our 3D cursor. So if we add anything new in Blender, it is going to be spawned at 3D cursor's location. So as you can see, it's spawned on that 3D cursor. So your 3D cursor position matters a lot. Now the orientation, why does the orientation matters? So I'm just going to change it to geometry. And if I do that and if I click, as you can see, it took the rotation of this face. If I click it over here, it took the rotation of that face. Now ignore this 0 point, like this smaller increment. You don't have to worry about it. If I click it over here, you can see we got the proper rotation. So if I now click on this, and if I do shift A, and then suppose, let's say I added a cube again. Now my cube didn't take the rotation in the first try. So what I'm going to do is, you can see align. If I change it to 3D cursor, now as you can see that my cube is now taking the rotation of the 3D cursor, and it is facing towards that direction. So it is a really helpful trick to use 3D cursor to model things along the normal of any faces that you might have created. Now I'm just going to press N and hold shift S and then cursor to world origin to make my cursor go over there. Now the geometry and the transform itself. Now transform works a little bit different. So this transform is referring to this global and local transforms. Now we will talk about them later, because I think video has gone a bit too much apart from navigation, but still I think we will learn about them later. So for now, let's just say that this 3D cursor is used like that. We already talked about them. The annotations, we will talk about them in future, but you can just draw things on the screen like this with it. Measuring tool is a really great tool. And you can measure things in Blender like this, but there are workarounds that you can use to measure things. These are two new things that was added in Blender: add cube and add curve. Now if you click and hold, you can add basic geometry like this. Now you don't always have to make 3D cursor. So if I wanted to add a cube like this, all I have to do is click uh, leave my mouse, click again, and voila, you just created a cube normal to that. And this totally depends where my, like this mesh, the preview mesh that you see, it is taking the normal direction of that face and it is going to create things like this. So now I can create a thing normal to this like that, and I can also create some other objects, which is a cylinder. So I can now create a cylinder like this. Now as you can see, it is becoming a oval. So if I hold down shift, you can see that it is constraining itself on all the sides, and I'm just going to leave my mouse, and I'm going to leave my shift key as well, and click left mouse button, and there you go, you just created a cylinder normal to that face. So that's how you use that toolbar in general, and I think this is good enough for this video. I guess we can talk about this timeline later. So this is basically your timeline, and we will mostly talk about it when we are animating things. So for now, you can totally ignore this window over here. So probably you might not get that amount of doubts in this video, but I can see some areas where you can get doubts, and I'm intentionally not clearing those things yet because I want you guys to get some questions, so that in the next video, when I will clear those questions in the next video as well. So don't forget to ask your doubts in comment section below, or ask them in the Discord server. I will, in the next video, I will clear them. And yeah, for now, try adding stuff, try moving stuff around in Blender. Wait, did I not tell you guys how to add stuff? So you can totally go in the add section, mesh, and you can add all these things in Blender from over here. Just play around with the mesh, the primitive meshes, and then move around, scale them, try to create a little things. And if you created something with just this first tutorial, do submit that in the Discord server. I would gladly like to see and check them out, because there is a lot of things that can just be done with just this primitive tools. So yeah, if you want to support this channel, subscribe, like, and share if you find it useful. And if you want to support it a little bit more, you can go ahead and do it on Ko-fi. I upload Blender files over there, but I don't think there is anything useful for as in this Blender file, so I probably might not upload it. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Bye bye.